Hey, it's Dan. Let's talk for a minute about backup offers. Let's discuss what exactly they are so we're all on the same page, and then why a buyer may or may not want to have their offer accepted into backup position, and why a seller may or may not want to accept an offer into backup position. First, what backup offer is. Now, you know that if a buyer writes an offer and the seller accepts it, either straight away or through negotiation, they have a purchase and sale pending and they're under contract together and so forth. So we're going to call that offer number one. So the seller has accepted this offer, offer number one, but there's a second offer that they really like. Now, that offer may have come in at the same time or it may have come in after, but either way, they want this one, offer one. They can take offer two and accept it into what's called backup position. And if they accept it into backup position, it means that should something go wrong with offer number one, and that is to get canceled or terminated or fall out of contract, once all that is signed and it's officially gone, offer number two immediately slides into first position, and now the seller has a sale pending with buyer number two. They don't have to go back to market. They don't have to go back and discuss terms or say, gosh, are you still interested? Contractually, when this one goes away, this one moves into position, and now the buyer number two and seller have an agreement between each other. In short, that's the gist of it. Why would a buyer want or not want to go into backup? Well, let's talk about the reasons why they might want to. So you're a buyer and you put an offer in on a home and it's not accepted. This is a little more common over the last couple of years than it used to be. But let's say that your offer was otherwise acceptable to the seller if it just hadn't been for that other one that gave them something else that they wanted a little more. In other words, there's no more negotiations or whatnot. They're happy with what you're offering, and they've now offered you backup position. The reasons why you might want to be there is that sales do fall through. So you may kind of think, well, if something gets wonky and this one falls apart, I still have a shot at this house. That's pretty good. Generally speaking, you're probably not going to go from backup position into first position, but there's a chance. This just leaves the door open for you. The other thing you might enjoy as a buyer in backup position is that you can continue house hunting. This is sort of like if you go and you call Target and say, hey, I'd like to put that item on hold. That doesn't mean you can't still go to, who competes with Target? Walmart? You can't still go to Walmart or Fred Meyer and buy the same item from them and then call Target back and say, hey, actually, I'm not interested. Same idea kind of holds here, except you can't buy these things at Target, but you can still go house hunting. So you're in backup position for the house on Main Street, but then you find something else on Broadway that you really like, and you get your offer accepted on Broadway. No problem. You just have your agent send a notice of rescission to the owner on Main. I must have been a long day. I can't put words together. You send that notice of rescission to the house on Main to say, hey, we're no longer interested in being in backup position, and rescind our offer or take it back. Now you can go on ahead and buy the house on Broadway and you're free and clear. So if you're the buyer in this case, there's not really any downside. You don't put earnest money in on the house on Main Street because you're not the buyer under contract and only they are going to put earnest money in. You don't have inspections done because you're not going to pay for inspections on a house that as of right now you can't actually buy. So all of this is to say that as a buyer, you're spending no money. You're not really committed. You're just saving your seat. You're saving your place in line while you go shopping for other things, and you can back out of that at any time. So why would a buyer not want to go into backup? Really, the only downside to a potential buyer is emotional. It could be that if you have your offer into backup position on Main Street, there's a part of you that while you're out shopping and going through that house, for example, on Broadway, is still kind of thinking about the one on Main Street and wondering if maybe the opportunity will arise for you to buy it. So the only downside is that emotionally you might get attached, whereas if you just say, nope, my offer wasn't accepted, I'm gone, maybe when you go back and go house hunting, you no longer feel like you have this emotional tie to that house on Main Street. That's it. Well, what about sellers? Why would a seller want or not want to accept into backup? The options here and the reasons are fairly similar. The reason a seller would want to is that, yes, they've accepted this offer. Whatever that offer is that's offer number two was acceptable to them if it weren't for offer number one. So it's not as if they're saying, well, gosh, we really wanted this, but we'll kind of go with this slug offer here. This is an offer that they would have accepted if it wasn't for this one. And it may be that they negotiated terms with offer number two to get them where they would say, we would accept it if something falls through. So for the seller, the advantage is you now have a backup, hence the name. If this falls through, you immediately have a buyer who's already pending if they haven't found somebody else. So for as a seller, you kind of already know that somebody else is there in the wings, and there's a chance that you don't have to go back on the market if this falls through. The other advantage is that in negotiations with buyer number one, if things get a little wonky, you might remind them, we have a buyer in backup position, and if need be, we could go to them. Sometimes sellers, while negotiating, say, repair items or appraisal issues with buyer number one, will call buyer number two and say, hey, if you're still there waiting in the wings, here's a hiccup that's come in. How would you handle this? And if buyer number two is prepared to deal with it in a way that is deemed better or preferable to buyer number one, the seller goes to buyer number one and says, take it or leave it, because our person in the wings is willing to do the things you won't. So sometimes having a buyer in backup position helps you as a seller negotiate better with the buyer in first or pending position. Hopefully that makes sense. So for the seller, it could mean not putting the house on the market, and it could mean better negotiating power with the person you're under contract with. The only downside to a seller is that in theory, if you went back to the market, maybe you could try and get an even better offer than the one you have in backup. But typically, if you've accepted an offer and you get a second one that you're willing to accept into backup position, those terms are such that you'd be pretty happy to have that. You wouldn't typically argue, well, I'll take this one into backup, but gosh, if I could go out into the market, maybe I could beat it. Usually, to accept an offer into backup, you have made sure that that offer is good enough that you wouldn't have any desire to go back to the marketplace. So for buyers and sellers together, there's not really a downside to accepting offers into backup position, again, other than maybe the emotional component. That's the short of it. If you have any specific questions, reach out and let us know. In the meantime, do have a great day, and we look forward to talking to you real soon.